sentences. Thank you. Okay, so let me just briefly introduce myself again. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Janet de la Luz. This is a face-to-face program workshop, and our workshop for today is Changing Lessons, Behavior as Communication, and that is an SEL Chicago workshop. Our presenter for today is Kristen Hovius. And now, Kristen, thank you for being here again. This is a wonderful series that parents are really, really enjoying. So if you would like to just introduce yourself again briefly, and we could get started, and I could stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really beautiful to be with you today. My name is Kristen. Most importantly, I am a mom. I have a 7th grader and an 8th grader. So I'm a mom at, my children currently go to Ravenswood Elementary, and I'm a new parent at Amundsen. So yay, officially today became an Amundsen parent. So I'm really excited. My work in the world is, I see it as a opportunity to help adults really create dignity-centered environments with our children, where our dignity is centered and where the dignity of our children is centered, and to empower us to have really courageous relationships with our children in a world that doesn't always center children's needs. So I'm just honored to be with you. I do have a slideshow that helps me, number one, attend to all the conversations that I want, and all the points that I want to attend to. You'll see that today's slideshow is in English and in Spanish. I am a native English speaker. It's the language I dream in. It's the language I count in. It's the language that I parent in. And we are running the same workshop on the 18th of April. And we will be led by a colleague of mine, Rosalinda Garcia, in Spanish. So I'm excited to share that out with any families who might be interested in having this conversation, and if the language that they dream in and love in and count in is Spanish. The conversation tonight was about changing the lenses, but it's also thinking about reframing behavior as communication, and especially reframing also misbehavior as communication, and then to provide us some deeply respectful and tools that help center dignity and center our dignity and our children's dignity. You have my promise of confidentiality. What happens in our room stays in our room. And what I also recommend is that if you find this learning helpful, that you share it out, that you can come to SEL Chicago's office hours. We have office hours twice a month, twice a month, and they're 2 separate sessions. So if you're an educator, we've got a session for educators. If you are a family leader, we've got a session for family leaders. And if it's possible, if you want to type your email into the chat to receive the slides, and you'll also be receiving from me reminders about the next workshop. It's as long as you're in the chat. It'd be helpful to know if you have attended previous SEL Chicago programming. Maybe SEL Chicago has come to your school and provided learning for your PAC or your BAC, or maybe you've attended one of these sessions. So if you have, it's always nice to know. And I'll be checking the messages and checking the chat as we go forward. I do want to invite you, as we gather together, to think about something that's really going well in your family. Something that's maybe going well for your children, something that's maybe going well for yourself. And then when you think about that, so you don't have to share what's going well. But if you think about that, how do you feel? So something that's really going well in your family and thinking about how you feel. And this is a feelings wheel that is originally from the work of a woman by the name of Gloria Wilcox. And can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So this is the work of Gloria Wilcox, and she put these core emotions together. And the emotions are mad, sad, scared, and then on the other side, peaceful, joyful, and excited. So the question is, if you're just entering something that's really going well in your family, and as you think about that, how do you feel? And if you could put your feeling in the chat, not you can share what's going well if you'd like, but I'm really curious about putting the feeling in the chat. I see that there are folks that are just entering, so welcome. And I'm just going to check the chat. I have we are hosting some friends right now, and I just greeted them before that I came in, and I'm feeling excited. So when I have asked that question before in other conversations, things that are going well, people have felt excited, they have felt inspired, they have felt hopeful, they have felt creative. So when we think about some things that are going well, we often find that the feelings that we're feeling are on the peaceful or joyful or powerful part of this feelings wheel. And why we entered, and I see inspired in the chat, and proud came into the chat. So, and why we ask the question is that one of the helpful tools for us building our own self-regulation is our ability to name emotions. If you happen to be in HBO Plus, Brene Brown has a series that is on the HBO Plus piece right now where she's actually talking about emotions. And in her recent book, Atlas of the Heart, she mentioned that in her research, people were asked to name emotions and they could name 3 or 4: mad, sad, sometimes scared, and sometimes happy. And so our ability to get really granular about emotions helps us to build our own emotional wellspring, our own resilience, and it also helps us to build empathy for ourselves and for others. So I offer that. I always want to offer immediately useful tools. And if you put your email into the chat, I'll make sure that I add on that Brene Brown series to make sure that you have access, or you may not have access to it, but at least you know what you're looking for. SELChicago, we believe, and these are some underlying tenets of the work that we do, is they include, we're all doing the best we can.
What are you doing?
With the skills and the resources we have. So this comes from the work of Ross Greene. Ross Greene said that he wrote a book called Lost and Found. He wrote a book called Lost at School. He wrote another book called, it's behind me, Raising Human Beings. He says that children will do well if they can. And if they're not doing well, it's because what's being asked of them is taxing or just a little bit beyond what their current skill level is. His idea, build the skill, focus on building the skill, and then our children will be able to do more. And then we're all doing the best we can with the resources we have. So our resources, thinking about parents, of time, of patience, of the ability to ask for help. When we ask for help, the ability to feel like we're receiving help that's helpful. So thinking about we're all doing the best we can with the skills and the resources we have. Another core belief for SELChicago is that behavior is communication. So if we're seeing a behavior that feels like a misbehavior, then we can begin to think about that, to look at it, literally to put on new lenses as, is that behavior a behavior that might be able to go away when we build a skill? Is it a behavior that might be able to be met with deep encouragement? We also believe that that misbehavior is a sign that there might be discouragement. Encouraged, and then the behavior won't need to be there. And tonight we're going to be talking about some specific ways, some specific tools to meet and encourage. We also believe that learning about human development and neuroscience in relationship helps us better support those in our care. And so you're going to be offered tonight some tools that are grounded in neuroscience. And we also try to make the neuroscience fun. So something that's not too big to talk about, not threatening, but something that is accessible. Because when we have these tools and when we have this information about both human development and neuroscience, we can use them to build our relationship of trust with others. And this is one of my favorite little graphics recently, that humans are wired to seek connection and to seek safety. We are safety-seeking beings, and we seek connection and safety through our brains, which are social organs. We learn, we thrive in what's called serve and return interactions. And so learning about some of this neuroscience hopefully can help us become belonging responders. I also just want to pause and breathe. And if our brains are also connected to our hearts, we think about why this is important. When we're learning as adults, we want to know, we can learn when we know something, we know the why of why we're being told something. And so when you see this icon, it's offered with love, whatever piece of information that is on that slide is offered with love, because sometimes, in the words of Maya Angelou, when we know better, we can do better. And I'm not talking about better as a judgment. I'm thinking about, I want to paraphrase that. When we know how we can be belonging responders, we can actually be belonging responders. And you may be learning something tonight that you've never learned before. And because we're talking about our kids, because we're talking about how we show up with children, you might learn something where you're like, "Ooh, I did that," and it might feel uncomfortable. And so all of this learning is offered with love. So it's also offered with experiential learning. So far, we've been having conversations in the chat. You might have put something in there. So I do want to offer that if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. You can use the raise your hand icon, and I will really work on pausing to ask if anyone has something to share or anything is. And there are actually going to be slides where I really want to invite your feedback, because I can't do all of this all this learning can't happen just from me. So we talked about that feelings wheel. And if you were here at the very beginning, we had the conversation or the question, what was going really well in your family, and how you feel when you think about that. And I want to pause that conversation and think about the conversation of, well, hold on one second. I feel like, oh, here we go. There's why we're talking about, and why you may be joining a conversation about changing lenses on behavior, is that maybe there are things that are happening in your family that you'd like some tools for. This hand model of the brain, we talked about deeply in workshop number 1. So if you put your email into the chat, I will make sure that you get a link to the recorded workshop of this. But I want to offer this information briefly so it can be an anchor and a link for the workshop today. So take your thumb and cover it up with your fingers. And I'd like you to think about your thumb as blue, your fingers as purple, and a little red spot on your wrist. And so this hand model of the brain was first originally talked about by Dan Siegel. And he and Mary Hartzell wrote a book called Parenting from the Inside Out. And so he offers this as, and I want to offer this as an anchor, that when our fingers are down, covering up our thumb, this represents our brain in a calm state, ready for learning, in a calm state, ready for looking out into the world and thinking, what can I learn? How can I solve this? How can I help? And then sometimes something happens, something small or something big, and before your cortex knows it, it might stop working when you flip your lid. And when you flip your lid, we actually get disconnected from the cortex's control center. So what does the cortex do? The cortex is responsible for, and especially our prefrontal cortex, which is represented by your fingers in this hand model. It's right behind this frontal lobe on your forehead. So this bone that makes up your forehead is right behind there. So our creative wisdom, our creativity, our flexibility, our executive functioning, our problem solving, our ability to manage stress, all happens in this prefrontal cortex. And when we flip our lids, or when something big or something small happens, if we really lose it, we get disconnected from those skills and from those tools. And if we are looking out through the world and we're not thinking that the world is safe, then fight, flight, freeze, faint, those are the actions, those are the behaviors you might be seeing or you might be doing. If you're looking out in the world and your brainstem, your limbic system is always asking the world, am I liked? Am I loved? Do I like and love myself? Do I belong? Am I being treated with dignity? If we look out into the world and that's not the way we're feeling, then you might use tools, or you might see tools used: name calling, blaming, shaming, defensiveness, gossiping could be there. And I'm reading this out because you may be, you might see these slides, but you also may be in the car. So that's another reason that I'm reading this out. So this comes from our perception. And so you'll see this again in our slides tonight, but I want you to think about our perception. The children that we are leading are amazing perceivers. And so are we. We perceive through our eyes, through our ears, and those perceptions make interpretations. And in those interpretations that happens in our brain, our interpretations create our beliefs, and our beliefs create behaviors. There is another lens shifter, another way of looking at things. So our beliefs create what we see, what we say, what our hands might do, what our feet might do. And I want to pause and say, if somewhere but it's not right here. Often they are my little pinkie pie glasses. I want to add that this idea that our children are perceiving things, we're perceiving things, is a tool to offer this. That the tool is that beliefs drive behavior. And there's one other big perceiver that's here. And again, in our second session, I believe we talked deeply about the vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve is always on. It's our gut. It is 80% sensory. It's only 20% motor. And our vagus nerve is constantly scanning the world for safety. That's that neuroscience connection to this work. So our brains are also wired to connect and reflect back and feel what we see. So sometimes when your lid might be flipped, imagine, it flips the lid in me. And you see this little offered with love symbol right up here at the top. This slide is offered with so much love because our brains are social organs. We are designed to perceive what's going on around us socially. We are designed to see what's going on with facial expressions of other humans, the tone of voice of other humans. And that is why when someone else's lid is really disconnected, when we have emotional dysregulation in others, it's why it can be so hard to maintain our calm with someone else. So this is the answer to this question, and I want to be really clear that you answering this question, at least for yourself, will help inform the rest of our workshop tonight. So the question is, think about a behavior, maybe since we're here and if you're entering this space, you're likely entering this space as a leader in a family, whether you are a parent or a grandparent or a guardian. So think about a behavior that has a tendency to leave you dysregulated, a behavior from maybe one of the children in your care. And the last time that behavior happened, how did you feel? You were in the presence of that behavior. You might have been dysregulated. How did you feel? And this follow-up question, does that behavior might challenge your brainstem or your limbic system? So your brainstem's question is, am I safe? Your limbic stem question is, am I liked? Am I loved? Am I being treated with dignity and respect? It's kind of an advanced question based on the very little bit of time that we've been learning together. What I'd like is for you to be really clear about thinking about that behavior, what that behavior is, and how it made you feel last time. And I want you to hold on to that for this next part of the learning. I'm just checking the chat real quick. I see that some folks have put in their email into the chat. If you're joining us and you haven't put the email in the chat and you want a copy of the slides, you can put your email into the chat or just say me, and then we'll know to ask for your email. So I want to pause. Janet, may I ask you a question?
Hi, Kristen. Yes.
Oh, thanks. Can you be my timer tonight?
Yes.
And so for the timer, what I'm going to ask you to do is, no matter what we're doing, if you could interrupt and say, Kristen, it's 6. Kristen, it's 6:15. So I just want to make sure that I'm really clear with time. And can you tell me what time it is now?
Of course, it is 5:26.
Beautiful. Okay, thank you. So if you could tell me that what time it is at, let me know at 6:40, or sorry, 5:45, 6 o'clock, and 6:15. That'd be really helpful.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So I want to ground this work, ground this section, and ground all the tools that we're going to be talking about in the theory. because the theory may be more important than the tools. Let me share with you why. Because the focus on this leadership, and when I say leadership, I think about this as leadership in a classroom, leadership in a school, leadership with other human beings, leadership in a family. The focus in leadership is often on the tools. And if you have a hammer, what do you use a hammer on? And if we were in a live room together, someone would probably have already shouted out a nail, right? Use a screwdriver on a screw. When we use tools in alignment with theory, the outcomes are pretty predictable. And they include that fidelity to practice. So a hammer puts a nail into space. A screwdriver is used on a screw and pulls two boards together, pulls a surface together. But how often have you had a screw? The screwdriver was nowhere to be found, but you had a hammer, and you used that hammer on the screw. What happens? And if we were in a live room, and if you want to unmute yourself, what happens? Please feel free. When I've heard people answer this question before, I've heard answers like, it doesn't work. There's a big hole in my wall. It might work for a little bit of time, but every time I walk by the picture, or anytime someone makes a big noise, it falls down, it gets crooked. Some people have said, I do some damage. It doesn't work properly. So it might work. It might only work for a little bit of time. It might work until you have to give your security deposit back, and then there's a big hole in the wall. So, and that's why we want to chat with us about, let's define the theory. So this begins with a question. And I do want to invite you to answer this question. And it's, what does authoritative leadership mean? When I say authoritative leadership, what comes to mind? What do you feel like that means? And I want to pause, and you can unmute yourself. You could type it into the chat. What does authoritative leadership mean to you? And if you type it into the chat, I am going to read it into the chat, but I won't read who typed it. So what does authoritative leadership mean? I'm also going to ask you, if you're Googling it, don't Google it. Go from your gut. When I have asked this question in the past, many people have said strict, firm, and this is what's coming into the chat: specific leadership, management of people, management of programs. But that strictness, I hear punitive, I hear harsh discipline. These are the things that I hear when I ask this question. Punitive, maybe punishment, commanding, yeah. So that's what often comes up. And I see that on my Spanish slide here, I need to change it. That should be an autorizado. So what we just defined is actually, if we're thinking about a leadership style, this leadership style was first defined, leadership styles in parenting was first defined by Diane Beaumorand in 1966. And it's a level of firmness or demandingness, along with a level of warmth and acceptance. So this, let's stay here. I'm going to annotate my screen real quick, that this is firmness. It's also, I'm going to put this in a typewriter here. It's also accountability. It's So teaching accountability, firmness or accountability. This other side, I want to define it as kindness. Or, so it could be kindness. It could also be connection. So warmth and acceptance, flexibility, and structure, rules, order, routines. All right, but let's define this. So when I asked the question authoritative, what came into the chat was high firmness. So what's going to come up in my, what's going to come up in my slide first is going to be the defining of, if we don't have accountability and we don't have connection, we might be unresponsive. We might be absent. That's what those in our care may be experiencing. So I'm not talking about that, although that's certainly there. And you may have fallen there as well. That high firmness, along with not a whole lot of flexibility, that is defined, the word is defined as authoritarian. Authoritarian. Rules, structure, firmness, but not a whole lot of experience of warmth and flexibility. The other side of that, lots and lots of warmth and acceptance, but maybe not a whole lot of firmness, is titled permissiveness. And when I first learned about this leadership style, when I read a book called Positive Discipline by Jane Nelson, in her introduction to it, she said, I was permissive until I couldn't stand my children. And then I flipped to authoritarian until I couldn't stand myself. And when I think about that, I also think about, imagine this as not just two-dimensional, but three-dimensional. So like if we had the fulcrum here and over here is permissive, whoop, it almost is like a slingshot, or like I can think about the term trebuchet, but I can't think of the normal term for that. Let's go for slingshot, like a catapult. There it is, a catapult. So it flips from permissive to authoritarian, but there's this other spot. There's this other set of tools, which is firmness and kindness, connection and accountability at the same time, which is authoritative. And firm boundaries demand with warmth and support, with encouragement, with limits. So what we're talking about, what we're going to be, all the tools that we're talking about tonight are authoritative in nature. And when let me erase my screen control, let me just erase my marks real quickly. I'm going to save the drawings so we have that, and clear the drawings. Thank you for being patient with me as I talk to myself. There are certainly, it's a balance, right? It's a balance of, and there are times when needs to be kindness only. There is times when we need to have firmness only. Like if your child is running out into the street, you're not going to sit down with them and talk about the potential implications of the truck, right? No, we're going to be firm. There's a time for that. When someone is injured, right? There's a time for kindness only. So there are certainly times when each one of these alone is what's right. It's what's predictable. It's what's necessary to keep safety. As long as safety is there, this idea of authoritative, of kindness and firmness at the same time, something that we can build together, it focuses on practices that are perceived by the child as centering their dignity. by really centering both connection and accountability at the same time. And I'm offering this with love because it's possible that just as we didn't identify it necessarily with ease, that this word, define it, authoritative, we may not access authoritative tools when we are dysregulated with ease, because we often ask, what do I do when? What do I do when these behaviors, when I see these behaviors? We may not know what's going on underneath them, right? When our behaviors are going on, when we see these misbehaviors, our children may be experiencing their private logic. They may be experiencing not feeling like they're safe, not feeling like they are being treated with dignity, not feeling like they belong. And so these tools, this theory of being, can help us create a culture of safety and belonging, even when the behaviors are happening. And it's hard to use tools that are maybe new or maybe different when we are dysregulated. So I want to pause for this and say that leading young people while centering their dignity is a learned skill, often. And I want to support this skill learning by thinking about an opportunity to do a little bit of experience. All right, let me do a time check. Let me pause before we dive into a new experience. That was a lot of information. So I want to pause. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and ask, do you have questions? Do you have thoughts? Would you like to see a slide again? Is there something that this brought up for you that you want to ask about? Because we have plenty of time for that.
We are still good on time, Kristen. It is 5:39.
Okay. All right. I'm going to invite you to, is there another term trending for this style of leadership? Oh, that's a great question. So if you are an educator and you have been reading Zaretta Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, and I'll be happy to send this in my link of resources afterwards. Zaretta Hammond describes this type of leadership as warm demander leadership in the classroom. So demanding high flexibility, high standards, probably co-created rules and structures with the flexibility to meet individual needs. So you'll hear the term warm demander out there. I'm going to see if I can find it real quick. There is a authoritative school climate and culture survey, and that is I'm just going to see if I can find this. So that from the National Center of Safe and Supportive Learning Environments has an authoritative school climate and culture survey, and they actually use authoritative as its question. So I'm linking that into the chat. If you are on a local school council, if you are a leader in a school environment, something that's, I think, helpful to know is that when students recognize their schools as authoritative, the human beings that are leading their schools as authoritative, every measure of school climate and culture goes up. And someone just put into the chat, to prevent confusions or mix-ups with authoritative terminology. For sure, yes, I agree. The challenge is that the research, and this is where you get into challenging, the research is around authoritative, and I think that is why things are very confusing. Because when we can't necessarily define it, maybe we haven't felt it before, it's really hard to be it. So for our purposes tonight, we can also use warm demander. Another way of thinking about it is when this type of leadership was spoken about originally by Rudolf Dreikurs and Alfred Adler. So Dreikurs, and I'm putting these names in the chat. So Adler's the same Adler of Adler University downtown. Rudolf Dreikurs was one of his students. They were defining it as, ready? Democracy. And I think I spelled that wrong. They were defining it as a democratic environment where people have a voice in how they're led. So, any other questions before we move on? All right, so I want to move on with a little tenderness. And we have a lot of people on the call, and you are welcome to unmute and type into the chat piece, but I'm moving on with I want to point here that I'm moving on with tenderness in the call, because we're moving into a question around what it's like to experience non-authoritative, right? So I want to have a memory reflection. It is very likely, if you were an adult, that you were once a child. And when you were a child, it was very likely that at some point you did something and a punishment came your way. And so I want to be very clear. I'm not asking you to divulge that punishment at all. I'm not asking you to divulge what happened. But I want you to think about it. Like, when you were young, you're not going to be asked about when you received a punishment, but how did you feel when you were being punished? What were you thinking or deciding about the adult? And what might you have done as a result? So we're not being asked about the event or what came your way, but again, how did you feel? What were you thinking? And what were you deciding?
Okay, Kristen, time
Yeah.
check, 5:45.
I so appreciate that. So I'm going to be watching the chat. I'm going to let yourself have 30 seconds or so, a minute or so to think about it. And then if things don't come up into the chat, I can share with you, when I've done this activity before, what other groups have said. So on this feeling question, some people have reported that they felt angry, they felt fear, they felt shame, they felt guilty. This is, again, as a child. They felt nervous, they felt embarrassed, they felt anxious. I see in the chat, sometimes they were mean, and I knew it might continue, right? So that's exactly what other when I've done this activity before, this adult is mean, scary, doesn't listen to me, disappointed in me. And as a result, yeah, I see in the chat feeling rejected. And as a result, what did you decide to do in the future? So this deciding question is really important. What did you decide to do in the future? Some people decided not to do it anymore. But interestingly, that rarely comes up. When I have done this activity in the past, people have reported that they decided to rebel, they decided to hide, meaning hide the next time they do it, get really sneaky, maybe comply, make sure I didn't do anything wrong again. I decided to be perfect. Maybe I talked back. Maybe they needed to hide things for adults. They decided that this adult can't be trusted. And so I know that if the adults in your world, when you were little, they're also doing the best they could with the skills they had, with the resources they had. We think sometimes that punishment will keep the behavior from coming again. Yeah, stopping the behavior took the punishment until the next time that it came up. And that's something that came up into the chat. So the reason I bring this up is that I'm looking at the results of punishment. So based on some of these experiences, the results of punishment, it may short-term stop the behavior, but the long-term are, according to Rudolf Dreikurs and Jane Nelson in her book, Positive Discipline, she defines the results of punishment as the 4 R's of punishment. With rebellion, I'll show you, I can do what I want. Resentment, it's so unfair, I can't trust adults. Revenge, maybe, just wait, I'll get even soon or on my own time. Or revenge, and I've added revenge as, I'm gonna hold this against you. Like revenge, I'm not gonna necessarily get even with you, but I am gonna keep this as a wedge in our relationship and you are not gonna come anywhere near me. I'm not gonna let you be close to me. And then maybe retreat, which can happen in one of 2 ways. Reduce self-esteem, meaning that I don't think I did something bad, but I'm identifying myself as I'm bad. Or sneakiness. I just need to get better at not getting caught. And I know that this is being recorded, but I just want to put my hand up and say, I was that sneaky one. I'm going to own it. So, okay, if not punishment, then how about rewards? Well, the challenge with rewards is that it works on some of the same brain circuits. Alfie Kohn wrote a book called Punished by Rewards. I was just rereading Drucker's book, Children the Challenge today, talking about how someone who is receiving rewards doesn't actually feel the pride of just getting the job done. And then the rewards, this other model, this other side of the same switch, is that our individual attachment histories and how we have resolved things that happened to us matter here. That we could be looking out if we were typically receiving punishment, we might be actually looking for the reward just to avoid the punishment. Or I think about how someone who may be watching other people receiving the rewards, what are they thinking about on the inside? The other piece is that we're learning more and more how the reward centers of the brain are not the same centers that actually hold on to information long-term. They're 2 totally different brain pieces in memory and cognition. And so when we give a reward, it actually may not be increasing the possibility that a behavior doesn't happen in the future. So again, both of these slides, they have the offered with love parts, right? Because if not punishment, and then if not reward, I still need to fix the behavior. This behavior still needs to be changed, adapted. What could we focus on instead? So we're thinking about how we're building our skills as belonging responders. And I want to define what a solution is. Be really clear about what a solution is. And as Jane Nelson defined the solutions as 3 R's and an H. And again, those are 3 R's and an H in English. The language that Jane Nelson breathes or dreams in and counts in is English. So it's reasonable, related, respectful, and helpful. So in Spanish, 3 R's and a U. So reasonable, related, respectful, and helpful. And I want to even define those even further. So when we focus on a solution, does it make sense to everyone? Is it part of what's allowed? I think I bring this up. Is it part of policy? Now, when I think about policy, sometimes policy should be changed for sure, no doubt about it. But I like to bring this one up when I'm working with teachers. If a class is being disruptive, if a class is being, if someone doesn't finish their homework, is it reasonable to take away recess? Some people say absolutely. But when we think about it, number one, taking away recess is actually is out of alignment with CPS Board of Education, Chicago Board of Education policy. And another thing that makes it reasonable is there is now this state law for recess. And it's against that state law and mandate to take away recess for punishment. So it's actually not reasonable because it does not pass the test of what the rules allow. So is it related? Is it related to building the skill that will reduce the possibility of behavior? Let's take that I didn't do my homework, or I was fidgety in class. Taking recess away isn't really related to that, building that skill at all. So something that is focusing on solution is related to building a skill that will reduce the possibility of that behavior in the future. Does it maintain the dignity of everyone involved? Is it respectful? I want to define this as mutually respectful. Is it respectful to the child, but also is it respectful to the adult? Is it respectful to the entire community? And thinking about a community of a family, community of a classroom. And is it helpful? So that is related. Helpful is related to the related R. Does it help develop new skills? And if harm happened, does whatever we have decided help fix or repair the harm? So this next offering of our conversation is to actually use a challenge that maybe one of you are having to come up with some really respectful tools that help build connection and build accountability. But before we move to that, you've seen this slide before. Leading with young people while centering their dignity is a learned skill. It is very possible that the first few times that you try to do this well, you might err on the side of firmness or err on the side of kindness, because thinking about working this way may not come really naturally to us, especially sometimes when we have been dysregulated and we may have said or done something that we're sorry about. The slide that's coming up right now, that the slide that I wish was coming up right now is a slide that says mistakes or opportunities. And I'll build that into the slide deck when I send it to you. Every time we make a mistake, every time we realize that we've made a mistake is an opportunity for us to build a deeper skill, another skill in the future. So I want to pause. And I want to say thanks for hanging in, because that was a lot of information. Questions, thoughts, wonderings. I'm assuming you're with me. And Helen, I see you driving. Appreciate you. So why I paused is because, do you remember when I asked for you to brainstorm a behavior that may make you dysregulated and how that made you feel? You remember I asked you that question? We have an opportunity to actually solve one of those problems in community, to brainstorm some solutions to solve one of those problems. Before we move on to that spot, I see it's 6 o'clock, and I'd like to describe, I want to pause for a second, and I want to describe, I'm going to add a couple slides into my slide deck because we have this time. So hold on a second. So that means there's time for a question as I'm building these other slides into my toolbox. Does anyone have a thought or a question or a wondering as I build these slides in? It won't take me that long, but thanks for your patience as I find this. All right. So if you're thinking about that behavior and you're thinking about how that might have made you feel, I want you to think about an iceberg. I'm going to share my slides one more time. And I'd like you to think about how much of an iceberg do you see? Now, I'm going to be also clear. I have never seen an iceberg in real life before. I've only seen pictures of icebergs. And I'm told that when we are looking at an iceberg, when we see a picture of an iceberg, if you see an iceberg, you are only seeing about 10% of the iceberg. And everything else is underneath the waterline. So when we see these behaviors, the behaviors that you brainstormed, the ones that made you feel dysregulated, if we see those, again, changing that lens, reframing those as a misbehaving child is a discouraged child, there's something underneath the waterline. And what are some of those underlying reasons that children may show us those challenging behaviors? What are some of those underlying reasons? And when I've asked this question in the past, and I'm going to type this into the chat so you can see, children might be tired. They might be hungry. They might not be feeling well. They might be sick. And so those are some behaviors that we could potentially, especially if they're single time things, we could tend to. We also might have a child who's really feeling anxious or insecure. We might have a child who is really discouraged, who doesn't feel like they can ask for help, who may have asked for help before and the help hasn't felt helpful, again, in that private logic piece. Something could be happening at home. Something could be happening, and this is coming into the chat, so they could feel a lack of belonging, they could feel a lack of being loved. Something could be happening in peer relationships. So everything could be fine with all the adults, but something's happening with peer relationships. And we also have to add a developmentally appropriate behavior. Sometimes we ask kids to have behavior, to be able to have it all together for an entire school day, day after day, and to stay regulated all the time. And it's barely developmentally appropriate for adults to do that. So I want to add developmentally appropriate behavior, or behaviors that could be there. There might be some sort of developmental difference, some sort of a brain that is their neurotypical brains, their neuroatypical brains. So a brain that is wired to have stemming as a behavior that is, or flapping, that is a behavior that is a self-regulation behavior, that's actually appropriate for that child. So I want to add to task here that this lens, if we're going to frame this, if we're going to adapt our frame, Rudolf Dreikers said a misbehaving child is a discouraged child. And if we can start to look at that frame, what are they discouraged from? So humans do better with encouragement, and every one of the tools that we'll be sharing are tools that are designed to be encouraging, both in the moment and in the long run. So if behavior is communication, then our responses can sense our dignity and belonging. So this is an opportunity. I see that there's something that came up into the chat, feeling belonging, accepted. Okay. So this is an opportunity to do community problem solving. And this activity is designed to have someone else as a co-teacher. So I'd like you to go back and think about that thing that you brainstormed. So the thing you brainstormed at the beginning of our time together, which was, I asked the question, is there a behavior? Is there something that's challenging? Let me grab the slides real quick. Sorry, because it didn't copy. Thanks for your patience. Oh, there it is. So is there a behavior? Think about that problem or challenge, that one that made you dysregulated. If you're not driving, you could write it down and be specific. And is there someone on the call who's willing to co-share that with me, to share that with us, so that we can use another tool to brainstorm solutions that are reasonable, related, respectful, and helpful? I have a backup problem in case we need it. So I'm going to ask you all for help. But is there someone who's willing to be a co-teacher with me and either put the challenge into the chat or to unmute?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Sabrina.
I want to thank you so much for being willing to unmute yourself and be on the call.
Yeah.
So here's the question. If you're willing, what's the behavior and when's the last time it happened?
Is it a specific age? I say, well, say teen, because I have a teenager.
That's
But I have
okay.
grandkids too. Uh,
I have a teenager too. And I know that there are a few other folks that have a teenager on the call.
yes. Well, my teenager, being too relaxed. It's just to me being so nonchalant that does something sometimes to me about taking life serious, especially your own life. And when you have people that's helping you and willing to help you, but sometimes we take advantage, not don't they don't I believe they think they taking advantage of it. But if you don't care about yourself, nobody else will care more about you than you do for yourself. So I have a teenager, which he is a parent as well. He's been a parent since he was 17. But I thank God for his teachers, Noble Network. I thank God for them. And because they understand. But for me, it's kind of, I understand because I've been there, but at the same time, I know I had to work even harder. So it wasn't about me, it's about my child that I had at the time. So that's just a behavior. Sometimes it frustrates me and I have to calm down. So I go back and I tell him how proud I am of him, and I show him, I point out the things that he's doing, because I sometimes I get caught up into where they're authoritative to where you can get to the point where you're too authoritative and you come to the point to where, okay, maybe I'm being too hard, I'm not being understanding. So I just think it's important too to not only point out the things that they're doing wrong, but to also let them see the things that they're doing good. And sometimes he'll come to me and he'll say, Mama, thank you. I'm gonna have to get him up on time. I have to make sure I get him up on time. And sometimes he comes back and he say, thank you. He'll come back and tell me, Mama, thank you, because I needed that. And then I just tell him how proud I am of him, and he smiled. And the next day he get up on time and he shows me. So I think that does help when you reward as well as that discipline, because children need that discipline. And it's not always about a whooping, it's about disciplining them. Discipline come with showing love as well. And and showing them too that you have been teaching them and talking to them, and telling them that you have to care more about yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will. And to be thankful for the help that you receive, and just show the people that you do. I believe it's in showing other people, I thank you for the help. And to show their thanks, don't just tell me, I want to see you do better. So, so when he come back and tell me and I just feel like that's important too as well. But that sometimes it does something to me, because I tell him, I say, you lucky, because as me, I didn't have that. Some teachers, and it's unfortunately some they feel like, okay, this is your life. But when you have somebody that really cares, I think it's just important to just show them, even if it's a little step at a time, do something better, change, and show them. And I believe people will really stretch their neck out to help, because I have the teachers at the school that he go to, they really show support. And that's very important, especially as teachers and leaders and mentors.
So you said something that I wish I had said earlier, Ms. Hunter, which was like, and it was almost a direct quote, discipline is teaching. And yes. and that punishment reward piece,
yes,
keeps us from taking on the fact, the idea that discipline is teaching, because we the Latin root of it, and tis this current season, right? We're in Christianity, we're in this Lenten season.
yes,
of a disciple. So the word, the Latin root of discipline is disciplice, which is actually to teach and also to lead.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned at the very beginning, you had mentioned that the challenge is that it maybe not taking something seriously, maybe not getting up in the morning. It sounds like you don't have I want to make sure if you have something that you would like some support on, that we center that and sort of name that behavior. And if so, is there a behavior that you'd like to have some additional support on?
I don't know. I don't know if I want to call it a lack of even confidence. That sense of to I'm just trying to look at my child. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but with him, Mike, because he was shy at one time. He still is, but he opened up. Again, I thank God for getting us. I took him for a job. He was 14 through the school year, and it was only a certain amount of students that was going to be accepted. And they accepted him as a modeling, and so I just felt that was the best role that he could play because it opened him up. And when I explained to the instructor, and she had said that she said she wanted him to join, and she was going to hire him because of that. And she talked to him and heard him, and she said, okay, because I think this will work for you. So, and I think it was a lack of confidence with him, but he's smart. He just get on the honor roll, and sometimes, I don't know if it's that or is he lazy? So I don't want to call him lazy. So
Okay,
that's what I'm trying.
Let's play with that a little bit. Let's play with that a little bit. All right. Could the challenge be asking for help when he needs it?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Okay,
that's
cool.
Exactly what it is.
All right, let's play with that. All right, so when your child doesn't ask for help when he needs it, all right, when he doesn't ask for help when he needs it, do you feel annoyed, irritated, worried, guilty, or angry, challenged, threatened, defeated, or disappointed, disbelieving, disgusted, hurt, or despair, hopeless, helpless, inadequate?
Okay, I think there's a couple of them, but because at first I didn't know, and sometimes that's important too. I wasn't engaging in them conversations with him. I just felt like he knew, himself, and I didn't. By him being quiet and shy, he don't ask for, certain things. And sometimes that don't mean that the child don't need, even as adults, don't mean we don't need help. Sometimes we just don't want to ask because either we feel like, what we asking for, embarrassed about asking. So it hurted me at first because when he came to me and he was saying, Mama, y'all don't know what I'm going through and what's on in my mind. And so I looked at him and I said, what? I asked myself, so why you didn't come to me and say nothing to me, about it? So I was hurt because I felt like at the same sense that did I neglect him because he's the youngest and I'm usually just work. So I felt hurt at first.
Okay.
And so after I did open up to him and told him, and I opened up to him and started talking to him, and I got his other siblings engaged to, talk to him, because sometimes children, especially being a male, and his dad, I reached out to him because I was married, and I think during our divorce, he being the youngest, it's like it hurt him to see it. So and I didn't find out till later on that it affected him. So I encourage people. That's one of the things I encourage people about marriage. And me, I am been a prophetess and ordained prophetess.
Hunter,
so yes,
I am interrupting you, and I just want I want to say that I'm interrupting you, and I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
And I'm looking at the time, so I want to ask the last time that he didn't ask for help, that you felt like you really needed to ask for help. Which was it? Was it annoyed, irritated, guilty, angry, challenged, threatened, disappointed, disbelieving, hurt?
I was disappointed. I think I was more disappointed because now you have no excuse. So I felt disappointed because you don't have an excuse now.
Okay.
So I think it was just more of a lazy side, but I try to come from their word. I try not to be so negative, but sometimes the truth hurt, and sometimes you got to let them know the truth is where you're being lazy. So I think it was more of a disappointment.
Okay, so I'm going to circle this real quick. All right, and there's a lot of space under here, so we have some more to think about. So you felt disappointed. Now, this is the mistaken goal chart. So this is helping, and I'm going to send everyone who has an email, I'm going to send this to him. This comes from the work of Rudolf Dreikurs, and it asks the adult to think about a behavior, how we feel about the behavior. And then we name the behavior. So the behavior is according to your feeling of disappointed is revenge.
Mhm.
And again, this is back into the theory of private logic. This is the perception, interpretation, belief, behavior. And so according to the one that you chose with this behaviors communication, when we choose disappointed or disgusted by a behavior, the behavior is, I don't think I belong, so I'll hurt others as I feel hurt. I can't be liked or loved. And then I'm also going to read out, I belong only when I'm the boss or in control. You can't make me. So if he's not asking for help and you feel angry or defeated about that, it may be over here in the misguided power piece. So do you have which one feels more like your son?
To be honest, with him, I don't know if because sometimes he tell me that sometimes he just feel lazy and he just feel tired. So, and so that's because when I ask him and I reach out to the teachers, and as far as I go all the way out and try, to do all I can do for it. So that's why I tell him, you have to want it for yourself. So I think it's more of sometimes a lazy, he feel like he's young, and for some reason, like, okay, I don't have to do this all right, like right now. And I tell him, what you do now gonna reflect your later on in life. It starts now, and especially, you have kids now, so it's not, you don't have to rush it, but you don't have as much time as you think you have, because you're going to continue to do the same thing, and then you're going to be 25 years old and you're going to be still saying that same thing. So you got to break that cycle. So and so sometimes I feel like because he come and tell me himself that he just feel kind of lazy, laid back, but I don't know if sometimes he just be overwhelmed at the same time, but because he do work as well.
So I'll ask you one more question, and I'm reading off the mistaken goal chart here. Do you, when he has this behavior, do you think, how could you do this to me? Or do you like give up, do for, over help?
I don't ever ask him how. I don't think how he do this to me. Because I tell him, I say it's gonna affect him. I teach my kids in a way. See, even for us with cleaning up, it's not about now. It's about your life. You're not doing it to me, as yourself. So sometimes I think I might over help too, because I feel he need the help. And I think maybe that was a crunch to him as well. But I don't. He's not so bad a kid to where I feel like he's just so disappointed to me, to that point. But I just try to get him because he has so much potential, and I see it in him. An artist, so I try to bring out that potential, those gifts and those talents in him. So sometimes I tell him, the things that he's doing, the behavior that I see, I will tell him, and then, sometimes he'll come back and he'll tell me, yeah, I feel tired, Mom, I just feel lazy. I feel like, like he has time to wait, on things, this ain't important. I don't have to be on time for school. He says that I don't have to be on time for school. So I said, yes, you do have to be on time for school. As long as I get there, no, you have to be on time. So it's like I'm not to the point to where I'm disappointed as far as with him, because you can ask, you got so much help just to ask. Right. So it's not that type of disappointment where you're not gonna be not that type of disappointment. That's why I said I didn't know how to like really say it, but the fact to where you can ask questions and that, and I talked to his teachers and he the same way in school. So I don't know if he just that shy or scared, so I had to tell him that just ask.
Well, let's play with this.
Okay.
This lens, potentially.
Yeah.
This lens, when you're feeling that feeling of either, angry that this behavior is happening,
Mhm.
disappointed that this behaving is happening, or even despair, right?
Mhm.
Starting to look at him
Mhm.
as communicating a different like a different signal.
Yeah.
So when he does this and you feel this way, you could think, let me help, give me choices.
Yes.
I'm hurting, validate my feelings, or don't give up on me, show me a small step. And I guarantee that if we were in a big room together and I had asked, has anyone ever felt frustrated or angry or disappointed about a behavior, everyone's hands go up.
Yes.
So having listened to, and I just want to, again, Ms. Hunter, thank you very much for sharing with us your challenge. I'd like to ask everyone else who's on the call who can look at the screen. These are all tools that are mutually respectful. They are grounded in dignity. They support connection and accountability. Ms. Hunter has done the really vulnerable thing of sharing with us her challenge. Does anyone else see, and let's let her relax for a second. Does anyone else see a tool that maybe she could use? And I will look for the chat. You can also, please feel free to unmute yourself. If you're in the Zoom call, you can also go to your annotate tool, which is over in the screen sharing, and choose a stamp or a heart.
Can I answer? Can I say something that I see?
Absolutely.
Model mistakes as opportunities.
And how do you think that might be helpful? Let's read. I'm going to read that tool into the space just in case people are driving. So the tool says model mistakes as opportunities. When our children feel that mistakes are opportunities to learn and reflect and build skills, their lived experience sometimes is that mistakes elicit censure or punishment. Being vulnerable about mistakes we make and apologizing when our mistakes cause relational fracture builds trust. Ms. Hunter, I just wanted to read that just in case people were driving. How do you think that might be helpful for you?
I'm trying to be quick. Like I had said to you, it's like when you said about the iceberg, it'd be something deep. We see the surface of it. So from the beginning, I had to apologize because I didn't, like I said, the first time I felt hurt because I didn't know what he was going through, and a part of it was with my divorce. So, and I believe that played a role on him through his life because he was always quiet and shy and didn't say anything. And when I like be late for things, sometimes I have a habit of being late for work too. So I show him, and I always tell him to take that, a prime example, take what you're doing and use it as an opportunity to do better. Use your mistakes and learn from it. That's how I teach myself, and I tell him, whenever you're doing something, it's not always about the punishment and just even punishing yourself, not forgiving yourself. Also take that and use it. Like if you do something wrong, take it and learn from it. What did you learn from it? So now reflect on it. Now what could you do better? So always take what those, use them as lessons being learned. Your mistakes, those are lessons that being learned, those experiences. Now you know better. Now you do better. And so that's what with him.
And the other thing I heard you say, so I made some other stars on some suggestions. The other thing that I heard is acknowledging when you have made mistakes, right? So that they can learn from us that we make mistakes too. We could take time for training, right? Providing clear expectations, leave notes. These are suggestions that I'm making. We could remember that he is 17 and
Yes,
his brain
18 yesterday.
happy birthday. All right.
Thank you.
So he is still that acknowledging emotional states, understanding brain modeling, his prefrontal cortex still has another 5 years before it's fully online. So maybe validating his feelings when he's having challenges, and then brainstorm with him some respectful solutions, and follow through respectfully. So I'm going to ask, and I'm aware of the time and I want to be brief. Ms. Hunter, is there 1 or 2 tools that you might take on? I know you chose model mistakes. Is there that tool or another tool that you think you'd find really helpful?
Practice deep listening.
All right. So I'm going to put my email in the chat, and Ms. Hunter, I want to invite you in a week. Send me an email and let me know how it's going.
Yes.
And
Yes.
thank you very much for co-teaching.
Thank you.
My hope is that even though Ms. Hunter's problem may be different than the challenge that you might be facing with your child, that some of her vulnerability as well as some of the solutions might be helpful for your challenge as well. Let me do this. I just saved the message. I want to clear the drawings. If you found this helpful, a kind reminder to into the chat, put your email, and I will follow up with a slide deck and the mistaken goal chart in both English and Spanish. There's this for when we are working on the 18th, if you are wanting to come and experience this class and this conversation in Spanish, we're going to be together with Rosalinda Garcia on the 18th at the same time. And we'll email you this mistaken goal chart. The conversation is, I'm hopeful that you could think about what one thing was that was from that proactive list that might help you the next time you're in the presence of a behavior that's challenging for you. And I'd also love for you to think about one thing that you're taking away from the learning that would be helpful. So if you want to put that into the chat, know that we're here. SELChicago, I'll put my email in the chat one more time. You can reach out to us and we'd love to be helpful to you in any way that's possible. So with that, I'm going to stop the share and send you so much love and turn the conversation back to you, Janet.
Thank you, Kristen. That was really amazing. I think parents also enjoyed this workshop. And I want to just take the time to thank everybody for joining us and being present and participating in this wonderful workshop. I hope to see you guys soon. Don't forget to register for future workshops and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.